Good evening, and welcome to Screentone Club. This is episode 5, recorded on the 2nd of September 2018. This is your fortnightly look at manga with a focus on joint discussion between myself, Elliot Page, and my gracious co-host, Mr. Andy Handley. How you doing, Andy?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Life is good.
Yeah, things have calmed down. It's not quite as hot anymore. I went and saw like 30 cats today, but didn't get to take any home. But hey, I got to see a lot of cats, so, you know.
Yeah, cats make everything better.
Also, a guinea pig, which kept headbutting the gate. I hope that thing was okay, Mr. Guinea Pig. Poor little pinny gig. So yes, this is our 5th episode of the podcast. Again, thank you to everyone who has been reviewing us on Tinternet and everyone who has been giving us lovely feedback. We're greatly appreciative, and we're hoping to take this to further and further heights. We have an announcement next episode, I think. It was supposed to be this episode. Apologies. Life got wild. Today, we're going to be taking a look at 2 series, which we picked for ourselves last episode. That is, on my part, the first Omnibus edition of Planetes, and from Andy, Satan's Secretary, Volume 1. Also, we are going back in time now to our Returning Champions feature, which we have brought back a second time, so it is itself a returning champion. Oof. So we have looked back at the Promised Neverland, Volumes 2 to 5. We're not going to try and spoil it, don't worry. But Andy, you shove this on document as at the poking of your own boss at work, you've caught up on this series. What do you think?
So I mean, we talked about Volume 1 a few episodes ago now. I think we both had plenty of glowing praise for it, and now 5 volumes in, I kind of only have more praise for it, really. I mean, I ended up reading this in 2 batches. I mean, the last time we kind of spoke, and I mentioned that I really needed to catch up completely on it. I'd read volumes 2 and 3, which I kind of read in one batch, which is kind of, in a sense, it's very much more of the same. Like, after Volume 1 sets the tone for what the series is and what's happening. Volumes 2 and 3 are kind of very much a case of kind of keeping up that pace and that cadence. It's a constant sort of cat and mouse game. There are, new things coming into play, things being kind of written out of the consideration of the characters. And, it was kind of good and enjoyable, but just sort of more of the same in the best possible way. But just this morning, I read volumes 4 and 5. And I mean, volume 4 in particular, it may be one of the kind of single most compelling volumes of manga I've ever read, I feel, because it kind of takes all of that stuff, all of the sort of the cat and mouse and this kind of high tension game in inverted commas that is being played between the various characters. And it ramps it up in some really important ways, but it also manages to find time to kind of slow things down and really take stock of kind of just how high the stakes have gotten. And it is one of the most kind of intense and kind of claustrophobic and sort of enclosed experiences I think I've had in terms of reading manga, because it was, it is really intense. It makes no bones about reminding you just how high the stakes are and how you're kind of, it is sort of at its D-Day effectively, time is running out to make things happen and do whatever needs to be done. And that volume was just to call it a page turner would be to kind of not really tell you the scope of just how good it was. It was, I sort of took a brief break after reading that volume just to get my breath back, because I think I'd been holding it for half of the volume. And so volume 4 was really kind of the standout high point for me. And now I'm kind of interested as to where it's going from now, because volume 5 kind of allows it to change things up a little bit. It's kind of moving on to the next phase of the story. And it's still really interesting and really fascinating, but it's still just kind of ramping that up. And I'm not quite sure what direction it's planning to head, but it still remains kind of a really good page turner. It's also kind of these later volumes have made me realize just how much I like the characters and the artwork as well. Those were the 2 things that I was kind of a bit these seem fine, but, I'm not entirely sold on them, perhaps, in the first volume. The characters were kind of effective at what they needed to be, but I wasn't quite sure whether quite how much I was kind of, invested in them. And by volume 4, it very much proved to me, yep, I'm super invested in them. And likewise, the artwork, I wasn't too sure about the character designs, but I feel like maybe it's just the artwork has improved a heck of a lot over the various volumes. But like, I feel like it's doing ever more impressive things in terms of like big 2-page spreads and kind of bringing across the kind of the emotions of the characters and kind of their situation and so on and so forth. Like it kind of feels like it stands out more and more the more that I read of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to echo your own sort of like hurried pace of reading it, I think I even told you at one point when we were discussing it that I was reading the last part of Volume 3 and then immediately bought Volume 4 on my bus ride to work, read that volume, devoured it whole, reading it, almost walked into the road at one point, reading it on the way to work, and then like bought Volume 5 and had it downloading in time for me to read at lunch to then devour it whole. And then as soon as my lunch break was over, I felt intensely empty because Volume 6 is not out yet. It was that kind of intense. I agree with you about like Volume 4 in particular, because like one of the things that the series has definitely gotten a very, very good grip on is its stakes and its tension, whereas quite often manga will go flaccid at some point because they can't keep up the same stakes, because it's impossible. People would lose their mind and melt down. But equally, it knows how to tweak and adjust things where even if it sounds like a clemency, it is itself a torture, which happens quite a lot to the characters, which really helps. Like, you empathize and feel for their plight and how they're trying to adjust. And yeah, the characters, I've really glommed onto some, including in some cases, I'm holding a candle for one or two of them, even though that I know, like, barring some kind of insane plot fear, they are very dead, or are not available anymore. So that's one fascinating thing about it, where I keep having to check myself and going, no, this, I know that I both know this series wouldn't do something like bring back a character you thought was dead unless it had a bloody good reason for it. There's some really fascinating sort of stuff that happens in the third and fourth volume particularly, as you mentioned, because a lot of stakes get rearranged and at this point now, like the situation has changed and the characters have a new footing to base themselves on. And I'll admit, for the first half of the fifth volume, I was very much a case of like leaning back and going, well, you have to prove yourself to me, dear manga. And it kind of is getting there now. I'm still very curious to see where Volume 6 goes. Certainly that's getting insta-bought when it comes out. And I think it's different. I don't say it's better or worse, but it's just different now in its stakes and where it is taking place. Like certain things have transpired that mean that they're obviously not out of the woods yet. So it's a fascinating sort of thing. And I've definitely warmed up to the art, mostly because I've now seen, like, it was always great at the grandeur and the 2-page spread and the sort of check out all this detail and the angular sort of thick outline style that we have. But now it's had so much more sort of scope to play with it and to show you all of its delights, both in its quieter and louder moments. There's like one panel where a character is there just as you would let yourself be lulled into a false sense of security. And you go, oh, I was a sucker. I thought everything was going to be okay. And now, much like the cast, I know that everything is boned. So it's really gripping. As you say, it's intensely gripping. I really enjoy it. At the same time, it's gotten to the stage now with its new arc that I'm kind of waiting to see how it proves itself. But yeah, there is... The one thing I got scared of is in the fourth volume, there's a moment where it kind of does the whole like rewind and then retell events in the true light sort of thing, which like gave me flashbacks to Death Note, and I got a bit scared. I was like, oh no, please don't do the thing where you keep writing yourself into a corner and then have to immediately U-turn next chapter because you forgot how to get out of it. You know, that's something that happened a lot in that damn series, and I was worried it was going to start infecting this one, but thankfully not. But no, I really enjoyed it. It's a real good, as you say, a complete purge turner, massive tour de force. It's fascinating, and and Emma in particular is like shonen protagonist to a T, even while all the rest of the cast are looking at her going like, fuck, we got a shonen protagonist here. Oh, God, bloody morals and ideals and a stupid hugger. Like, what is this? And then she manages to pull it off because even she knows that she can't go full shonen protagonist, which is helpful. So, yeah, really, really gripping stuff. Really enjoying it.
Yeah. The worst thing about it now is going to be that hopefully not too long wait for Volume 6 because it's going to feel interminable, I suspect.
I think it's November it's coming out. Of the one thing I did look at, of course, is getting a Shonen Jump weekly subscription to plug the gap, but the gap is too large to bridge it with the 10 back issues that you can get. And also, that app instantly crashes on all my Android devices, and I have no idea why, and I've emailed support, and they have no idea why. So my primary way of imbibing that content is closed off to me. So, welp.
Oh, well.
Sad. But yeah, real good. I'm really enjoying it. I recommend it highly. Please see our previous episode for more, sort of explicit thoughts on the Promised Neverland. So anyway, moving on to this week's picks. Andy, we flipped a coin before the recording, and you're going first with Satan's Secretary, a title I was going to recommend, and then you stole from me. But that's fine, because I can talk about it as well. So, if you please.
Yeah, this is the recurring theme of this podcast now. I just steal all the things that you want to talk about.
It's just a good sign that we both have good taste, clearly.
Yes, hopefully. So Satan's Secretary, as I mentioned on the last podcast, like I saw somebody like post the cover of it on Twitter and say, hey, I'm going to read this. And I thought, well, that looks like trash. And then they posted a few panels from it. It's like, oh, wait, maybe it's not. That actually looks really kind of good. So I wanted to check it out, and here we are, checking out the first volume. So basically the story is set in your kind of typical world of good versus evil, where there is a hero and there is also Satan, who has been sealed in inverted commas. He's really kind of just having a lie in. And then after oversleeping by a decade or so, which, I think we can all get behind, he finally awakens and decides, well, it's time to subjugate and destroy humanity, because that's kind of my job. And so one of the first things he does is he sets his minions out to say, hey, like, capture some capable humans who, will know what's going on in the human realm, and they can kind of give me all the intel that I need to crush humanity. And he ends up with what is basically the secretary of the king of a realm within the world, who turns out to be more than capable as a secretary, and also more than willing to say, like, yeah, sure, I'm in with this idea of just destroying mankind. Yeah, why not? And let me help you organize it. And so kind of the early running is the good part of the early running of this story is it's very much a case of as a good early example, like Satan is talking about, oh yeah, I'd like my women to be submissive, to which I retorted straight away, well, that's sexual harassment. You can't do that in this workplace. And it's basically, she kind of goes around improving workplace conditions, introducing everything from like maternity leave and paid holiday, etc., in this world of demons, to the point where it's kind of seems like it's preferable to the human world. And it really just kind of carries on in that vein, where really kind of the actual powerhouse of the demon world is actually this incredibly competent and capable secretary, while Satan kind of mostly kind of goofs around, drinks too much, etc. And I kind of really enjoyed the first few chapters of this. Like, it's kind of fun and peppy, and it clearly, I mean, looking through this first volume, it actually includes like the original kind of doujinshi version of this that was published in like 2014. That felt like it was very much just kind of a one shot, like, hey, here's a really goofy little premise, and here's a little bit of this world, and it kind of works to that extent, but I did find that it kind of started to get old pretty quickly. Like the social commentary and the commentary on kind of employment conditions only takes you so far. And it kind of felt like it ran out of road pretty early on for me. Like, kind of by the end of the volume, I was like, yeah, fine. I don't really need or want to read any more of this. I'm not particularly invested in where things go from here. Like, I've sort of had a decent enough time watching this character doing her thing, and there have been a few good little jokes along the way, and a few good little kind of pointed bits of social commentary, and I'm kind of checked out of it at this point. And so, I kind of got to the end of it feeling it was already a bit overly long, even by the end of the first volume.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's a rather svelte 150 pages, and like you say, by about page 60, I was checking out. I mean, this is my second time reading this, because as mentioned, I've read this before and was going to mention it for the podcast regardless. But yeah, even the first chapters kind of miss me a bit, because reading it back a second time, it's really quite it goes for everything easy, like everything. Most of the, I mean, it's still like it's not laugh out loud funny. It's more sort of like sensible chuckle / heh sort of joke rather than like ha 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 ow my sides. It's very much a case of low roiling, kind of funny, but not really going to make you laugh that loud. And especially when you keep getting like weirdo like tentacle monster jokes, it's like, yeah, I get it. Like sometimes it has a good joke, but it's 1 out of every 4 times it tries, and like. You know, it goes for, like I say, it goes for the low hanging fruit of like, oh, what if we made the Demon Lord a lazy swine? And what if we did this? And it's like, yeah, we get it. And there's a few sort of like modern workplace conditions / millennial jokes that are like, they just say the joke. It's not even a joke. They just say it. And it's like, yep, that's, I guess that's a joke you're making. Like you just said a thing and that's kind of it. So yeah, it's a bit base, and like I say, it was very much a case of like on the second read was like, oh, this isn't actually that interesting. It's very forgettable, like intensely forgettable. And the one thing I dislike greatly about it, and I'm going to sound like such a prude, but whatever, I've done this before, is that it has a few pages where it's like, oh, what if we mind palace do rude things to the secretary? And it's like near hentai level art with like, you know, bits of clothing just in the right place. And it's like, come on. And then of course the secretary retorts and goes, no, you can't do that. And it's just kind of sucks that they even put it in there to begin with, because it's not really that it's not that titillating. It's interesting. It seems intensely incongruous, and it's just sad. So that kind of knocked me off, especially on the second read, going, yeah, I get it. And yeah, it kind of, as you say, it runs out of road, because at the end it has this weird little heart-to-heart moment between the Demon Lord and the secretary, where they find a really weird piece of common ground where you're like, oh, this is actually an interesting thing. Shame I'm already completely bored of this series. Never mind. And then it sets up like a volume 2 stinger that I was like, you know, no, like, I'm sorry, you have set up an interesting stinger here and maybe something interesting will happen, but the last like 2/3 of the manga have basically made me sort of shrug wholeheartedly at it. So I'm not really that bothered in continuing. Sorry. Especially on second, again, sorry to hammer this point home, but especially on a second reading where I was like, oh yeah, most of these jokes, yeah, they were okay the first time and now it's very meh. So yeah. I think it's also a case where like the Demon Lord is too much of a lazy sod. Like, he's very, very easy as a butt of jokes. In fact, too easy for my mind, where it's just like, yeah, we get it. Like, he's crap, but you need to do more than that to make him interesting.
It's the weird thing with some of the stuff that you've mentioned is it feels like it's kind of a setup that I'd kind of be more okay with if there was a decent payoff to it. It's like the whole, you know, those aforementioned kind of lewd panels. Like the first time I came across one of those, it's like, okay, there's maybe going to be a really funny payoff to this where you're going to kind of get your comeuppance. But instead, like you say, it's just a straight up, it's like, nope, not happening. And it's like, oh, well, you've literally just dropped that in there, like, and you've not actually done anything with it beyond the obvious, like, oh, we'll titillate the reader for 2 seconds flat here. Yeah, and kind of likewise with the actual Demon Lord, it's like it feels like it would have been a richer vein of comedy to have him actually be competent himself, but still being overshadowed, rather than, like you say, just the kind of, you know, lazy, like, oh yeah, like I stayed in bed because I'd been drinking kind of archetype, which again, that's maybe mildly amusing the first time, and then it's just like, you've done that joke now, you know, well, where do you go from here?
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that they hint at initially, like right at the off, and then immediately stop using it as like a possible vein for comedy, is the fact that he's been asleep for 300 years and knows it, and so everything he wants to do is really old-fashioned. Like, if it had him being competent, but competent in an old-fashioned manner, would be way more interesting as a basis of comedy. And the other thing about the comedy in particular is that it tries to cram in a lot of jokes, and the problem is there's no time to develop really any of them for a basis. So it's like it sets out its stall for certain gags, but it then throws everything out so quickly that you're like, oh, I guess there were like 3 jokes on this page, but none of them really hit. It all just kind of happened. Like I say, it's much more of a manga than a, oh my god, I'm dying. So yeah, it's weird, but you know, it's well drawn. Like, the monsters look cool, apart from the weird tentacle beast one. But like, well, he still looks good at being a tentacle beast. But yeah, there's clearly a lot of love in the monster design in particular. It's like, oh, you clearly grew up with all these like 8-bit RPGs, and you like drawing monsters. And here's this cool, like, you know, like gargoyle looking dude. So yeah, it looks quite cool, but it's all very slight, so you barely really get a chance to like really bother with them at all.
I think that's probably one of the things that I also kind of bounced off, because I think I've slowly become kind of tired of that sort of video game RPG kind of influence for a lot of this kind of design work, and it's like it's another one of these. Like I feel like I've seen too many of them at this point.
Well, at this point, everything's done it. Like, and also everything's kind of done it to death already. Like, I mean, we've been through the like tunnel of Log Horizon, Sword Art Online, So I'm a Spider, So What? Like loads and loads of stuff have cribbed this, because unsurprisingly, anime fans are dorks and nerds and like playing RPGs or video games by and large, or know of them enough because they're also in the nerdy orbit. And so it's such an easy touchstone that everything has mined that vein to exhaustion now. Like, it's done. Even things that are like video game adjacent. Like, I've been playing the friggin' like, Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon mobile game? And the entirety of that world rests upon very video gamey principles. And everyone like in that world knows it, but doesn't say, hey, we're in a video game, because that's the world they're in. But it's a video game. Like, it's set up in their stats screen is on their back. That's one of the main things of that series. So yeah, it's wild. That's sacred. So yeah, I feel a bit sad, honestly, because when you picked this, I was like, oh good, I get to talk about this series that I think I remember quite enjoying, and then going back to it, I'm like, oh no, this is kind of meh.
Yeah. I mean, I think kind of my takeaway from it is, as mentioned, I was attracted to this by somebody posting like a few panels from it, and they're like, oh yeah, that all looks really good. But I feel like I saw all the good panels of that manga, and there was, there are a few things like above and beyond what I'd already seen, but like that was kind of the mainstay. Like, I feel like I'd seen the jokes for the most part, and it's very much a one-trick pony as in those terms.
Yeah. Oh well. A little blurb about the manga itself that I meant to try and insert at the start. So the author is Kamonabe Kamosu. Oh Jesus, I'm bad at these pronunciations. It's published by Seven Seas because, of course, it is. It's a bit lewd. It's not yet complete. Only one volume is available right now, and you can get it on most digital storefronts. I haven't seen it physically, but then again, I barely look at physical releases nowadays, so that's my bad. Be funny if you could get it not shrink wrapped in a store and just open it to the porno pages and leave it there for people to find. Just like make Waterstones a pit of vice. Cool. So unless you got anything further about it, Andy?
Nope, I think that is all I have to say.
Cool. Moving on to our second series, and this gets the continuing Elliot Page Award for Elliot. Why did you pick such a long manga, you moron? Because if I had to burn through this over a long weekend, but it was worth it. So this was Planetes Omnibus 1. This is a re-release of the manga Planetes, which is now being released by Dark Horse in 2 honking great omnibus editions of 500 odd pages each. Which, the pricing comes out very nice, actually, as a result. It's all complete. Again, 2 volumes. That's it. And it's physical only, which annoys me to no end because I don't have room. But because it's Planetes, I made an exception for it because, whisper it, but I haven't watched the anime despite many, many people telling me I should. Because, I'm lazy. Also, I bought discs for it, but then I scratched them to death in the house move. So, whoops, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, so Planetes is the general sort of back of the box quote, I suppose, and also the way that everyone introduces this series is it's about bin men in space. It's 2075. Humanity has just about started to reach the stars and is exploring the inner solar system. More and more space flights need to go up, and something that is already a problem right now in space year 2017, 2018 even, is that there's a lot of debris up there. Stuff falls off, ships break or explode, and it all hangs around in orbit by and large if it doesn't burn up on re-entry. And even something small, if it's in orbit with the Earth, it's moving dang fast. And if it hits anything else, it can do a lot of damage, which the series very ably shows on page 6, where it shows a big honking hole in the side of the ship, which our main characters are in. The toy box, the DS-12, which is a garbage collection ship, which is in low Earth orbit, and basically they collect crap, discarded fuel tanks, nuts and bolts, the odd crap. And it stars the like crew of the Toy Box. They navigate Fee, a very taciturn Russian dude called Yuri, and Hachi, what's his name? Sorry, it's
Hachimoto, isn't it? I think
Hachimura. I think.
I think it's
Hachimaki.
Hachimoto. Oh, is it? Right.
Hachimaki. Yeah, I remember now. Hachimaki, who is like the kind of baby of the crew, even though he's been doing it for a few years. And initially I was quite excited because I thought it was going to be like an ensemble cast about the adventures of these people on Toy Box. But then after a few chapters, it very much gloms onto Hachimaki and his desire to get on a maiden voyage of a new von Braun ship, which will be flying out to Jupiter, which will be the furthest that mankind has gone in manned spacecraft, to basically set up a giant gas station, like a giant fuel rig, for further exploration. And they're testing out a new engine, and there's, sort of lots and lots of machinations around that. There are people who don't want mankind to colonize and expand into space due to quite sensible reasons, honestly. Can't really blame them too much, although their methods leave something to be desired. And so it kind of turns into this long-running series where, like, at one point I felt like it fell into this very nice, comfortable cowboy bebobish sort of vibe of like very down to earth. Sorry, that wasn't meant to be a pun, but very down to earth space exploration, starring this sort of crew of people who have their own loves and dreams and lives and want to get something out of their life. And, humankind is in space and humans are still idiots, sadly. And so everyone just kind of like muddles through, but it quickly pivots away from that just as I had it in view. And it becomes Hachimaki's kind of like weird, like just soul searching through the darkness of space, and what he wants to do about this Jupiter mission, his relationships with his co-workers, how he interrelates with all the world and how it's all building up around you as the reader. So there's a lot of very good sort of exposition through that, a lot of fascinating sort of things. A lot of it is like well done, sort of like sci-fi sort of touchstones, but done in a very sort of personal, like heartfelt way. Such as what happens when a kid is born on the moon? ? That's like chapter 2. So yeah, it's very fascinating like that. I mean, the one thing about it is that right from the off, the first chapter is basically like one of the single most killer one-shots you can make with the like remit of space garbage men, and it's really good. Like the first chapter alone is like enough to like just blow your eyebrows way off. And as expected, it has really nice 2-page spreads and art because it has the ability to play around with like near future, but still very generic and down to earth tech, like, and construction, like with the Toy Box, the ship, which is basically a giant cube surrounded by shielding because it's a garbage ship. You don't need to look pretty. And also just all the accoutrement of their daily life of like living in 0G and trying to keep themselves fit in like hellish, like sort of solar radiation. And so on. And it looks really pretty in general. Like it has some amazing 2-page spreads of just character looking at space or character being in space. And it really helps you like sort of feel like you're part of the experience. And in general, I really enjoyed it, but I must admit, part of me is the fact that like when the series starts to glom onto Hachimaki for most of the second half of the volume, while still fascinating, and it's really intense in how it depicts like characters and growth and what they want out of the world now that we have space there, and is there anything for them? Why are they doing anything? Like, what is mankind's place in all this? There's a question that appears very frequently. I still would have liked more actual trash men adventures because that was really fascinating, but at the counting, there's only like 3 actual storylines, or 2 even, that involve actual space trash. Which sounds weird that like I want more bin men in my manga, but that was a really fertile ground for exploration and interesting sort of stories. And it's kind of pushed all that and the rest of the crew aside. Also, like halfway through the volume, they introduce a new character, and then immediately, like between 2 chapters almost, like they cut out part of the book almost, to my mind. But suddenly there's a romantic relationship which is out of nowhere, and thankfully one of the characters in it is also as confused as I am about it. Sorry, I've gone really long on this. But Andy, what did you think? Sorry to go so long. Whoops.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah, so I mean. To start off with the positives, like I'm with you on everything that you said. Like I am,
Woohoo!
I am like hand in the air, an absolute sucker for this kind of realistic, kind of near future futurism. Like, I mean, Space Brothers sits in a similar vein to me. Admittedly not read the manga, but the anime of that is also really good at that kind of space exploration that's, it's just far ahead enough of our timeline to be like, oh, hey, we're not just kind of scrabbling around and maybe figuring out going to the moon again. We've gone beyond that. And, we're looking at more ambitious things. And I'm a complete sucker for that. Like, I think I'd be interested actually as to kind of how this series kind of reads with maybe like a younger generation, because I feel like you and I are probably both still of an age group where we were kind of, as kids, able to watch various spacecraft taking off and shuttles launching while it was still
I saw the Challenger happen in real time. As a kid, that fucks you right up.
Exactly. Like, yeah, that happened likewise at a very young age, but like there was still this kind of fascination with space and like the exploration of it, the danger of it. Like, it was all kind of like catnip to any kid at that time. And like I feel like in the wake of Challenger in particular, like that has very much faded in terms of being in the public eye, I feel, quite a lot. And I wonder whether it sits differently for another generation. But for me, yeah, this kind of stuff, you can just pump it into my veins, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I find fascinating to watch or read and to think about. And yeah, that is what I really love about this series, is the way that it does a lot of soul searching on a personal and on a broader level about, what the characters, what motivates them, like why they are doing what they are doing, and, what this all kind of means in terms of the big picture for humanity. Like, what is the right thing to do when it comes to kind of exploring and, exploiting, let's be quite honest, space. And, it has some really interesting characters and some really interesting takes on that, you're not going to agree with them all necessarily, but it does make some really interesting arguments that you could actually sit down and have a really good kind of structured debate around, some of the points that it raises. So all of that is all stuff that I really love about it. But boy, does this series also do some things that really ground my gears. So, I mean, the one that really, there was a point reading this omnibus where I was glad that this was a physical book and not a digital one, because I threw the book down rather than throwing my tablet down, because that would probably have done more damage and been more expensive.
As someone who has recently dropped a tablet, yes, it does a lot of damage.
Yeah, like having done that once before in the past, like I was glad that my kind of frustration was just, against some bits of paper rather than anything more technological or expensive. Because I'm gonna, if you're really kind of spoiler averse, you may want to fast forward like a minute or so, because I'm going to have to kind of dig into a specific story arc here.
I'll put TIMECODES in the notes, by the way.
Yeah, cool. So there's a story arc here, as Elliot kind of alluded to, around some people feel like the exploration and exploitation of space needs to be stopped. That, like, in the world of Planeteers, like, the Earth has been kind of not destroyed, but like it's not in a great place. A lot of its resources have been exhausted completely, which is why space exploration has been accelerated like it has. And so
as a quick side note, all the shots of it being on Earth are all idyllic. Just as a quick addendum to catch you up on that.
Yeah, that is one of the weird things. But anyway, so basically a terrorist organization has been born around this idea that, like, humanity needs to be stopped before it screws up space as well. And they become kind of a recurring theme. They're going around, as terrorists do, blowing stuff up. And there's a whole story arc around that and around the leader of this terrorist group. But that entire arc is somehow like concluded and brought to a climax because said terrorist leader sees two characters kissing and just decides, you know what? I'm not going to be a terrorist anymore, and my entire terrorist group is going to disband with no questions asked and just stop blowing stuff up and just like completely disengage from this thing that they're supposedly super passionate about. Because hey, I saw two kids making out, so I guess the world is okay after all.
It wasn't even making out. Like, one of them just grabbed the other one and, in exasperation for the fact that they wouldn't see that they liked them, kissed them. And, like, meanwhile, like, terrorist homeboy's entire crew are laid there on the ground, knocked out. And it's like, they're not even dead. Like, if he'd lost his entire crew, maybe he could then go, well, shit, game's up. I got no one to follow me. But yeah, it's also like just tossed off in like a 4-word little speech bubble of like, the bombing's stopped. And it's like, what? So
yeah, it is the most bullshit end to any story arc I think I've ever read, and it's just like, and just the idea, like, had it just been that kind of the leader decided, this I've seen the error of my ways, like, that's it, like, fine, but the idea that the entire organization then just shuts down because this one guy has decided, like, nah, maybe I was wrong, is just like, it just so didn't ring true. And again, like, one of the things that I like about this kind of realistic futurism is that it tackles kind of, modern issues that concern us right here and now, and kind of hopefully has some interesting things to say about them. But this was not the case with that story arc. Like, you've not told me anything kind of helpful or interesting to kind of frame the debate of modern terrorism and its origins, because, like, it's just utter tripe in terms of how it's concluded.
I feel like there's a few cases where, like, not to sort of dogpile, again, I really enjoyed what I read. It really, like, I managed to outstay my welcome in another cafe because of this book, because I was reading it and wouldn't leave the table. Sorry, Tesco. But, like, it does that several times where, like, it will have these long discussions about, like, sort of political issues, about resources allocation, about exploitation of resources, about, like, human beings and how they are treated. And it then kind of discusses it, but then very much either wimps out or has a very much cake and eat it style solution, or non-solution in some cases. And it makes it feel very unsatisfying. I mean, it even ends another, like, very poignant emotional arc, which I won't say too much more than that. But basically, there's an arc. The first chapter is like this amazing potted arc. And then as a follow-up, it brings back a ghost of that and resolves it in a really, like, just unsatisfying all around way, which is very exhausting. And like I say, like, the way that, like, Tanabe, a new character, gets introduced and suddenly has all this history that you don't see, I honestly felt quite shortchanged, because, like I say, at one point I thought I was getting Cowboy Bebop, but space garbage man, and I was so on for that. And then no, it's totally not that at all. That's not what you're going to get. And I was so annoyed.
Yeah. And I think that the other issue that I kind of have, as you mentioned, like the introduction of Tanabe and the relationship angle there, like it's the same issue that we kind of discussed in our first episode with Perfect World, where it kind of introduced a relationship that I just couldn't kind of invest in or believe in. And Planetes has that kind of times 10, because it just drops these two characters who are they're complete opposites, but not in that kind of opposites attract way. They're complete opposites in that you are going to argue in literally every panel that you share. And, like, even the one time it seems like they're maybe going to kind of find some sort of, come together and be nice to each other, it lasts like about half a second before it all goes south again. And it's just like, how am I supposed to believe that these two characters have any kind of interest in one another? Like you say, at least one of those characters is as confused about it as we are, but even then it's like, where is this even coming from the other side of that? Like, it feels so forced, as if it's just like, well, we've got to have a love interest in here, so I'm just going to drop this character in.
Yeah, when you really, really don't. Like, you really don't. Like, you already have enough stuff to look at that is cool in this series. You don't need love interest.
Yeah, it's weird, because I can kind of see where that's coming from, because there are some interesting questions around that, because the idea of basically giving up kind of decades away from your home, that being Earth, for space exploration, what have you, and it explores it in quite an interesting way with Hachi's kind of father, who is very much
way more believable and has a way better romance plot, even though it's like 5 panels long.
Yeah, like he has a really good arc of, like, hey, he's incredibly passionate and incredibly talented at what he does, and so he's kind of been sort of an absentee father in a lot of ways, simply because, like, he's been following his passion, and he has really interesting things to say, and his wife has, and Hachi's mother has really interesting things to say about that state of affairs, and what that means for everybody involved. So in a way, that kind of covers the angle that they're going for. I can see why you'd want to have, like, a different generation's take on that with Hachi, but it's really, like, at least put a character that makes sense into that role, not a complete kind of opposite where it just never kind of gelled with me. And this is also kind of the one thing that I disliked about the anime as well, which you mentioned you haven't watched. Like, that was always the one thing that stuck with me from watching the anime, and it's still very much present and correct here. So yeah, it's a weird one because like I really like so much about this series, but like the two caveats I have feel like they should be overwhelmingly big, but they aren't, because I think that speaks to the strength of the other content here, that maybe it is just because it's catnip for me, but I still say like, yeah, you should read this. It's really cool. Despite the things that, cause me to throw the book down in frustration.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's like I say, it's really well drawn. It's really beautiful. Like, it has some amazing, like, just design work and scope, and like, and it has some really fascinating ways of like juxtaposing characters. And there's like a frigging like, trip out sequence, almost like that bit in Macross when Hikaru is out for an entire episode because they hadn't got any budget left. But actually it became really iconic because it's just a character hallucinating, and it has something like that. And yeah, it's really amazing. But when it clangs hard, like quite painfully almost, of like, oh man, you were batting 100 and now you're like, just doing nothing. So yeah, it's a weirdly frustrating but very, very recommended manga. The main question, of course, I suppose at this point is, are you going to get the second volume?
I don't know. That is the interesting point. Like, at this point, my feeling is probably no, simply because kind of all of my frustrations kind of come in like the latter part and the latter chapters of this first omnibus, and it kind of leaves me thinking like, well, I kind of get the feeling that a lot of the second omnibus is going to be the stuff that I don't like about it, so maybe I should quit while I'm ahead. But there is also the other part of me is like, oh, I don't know, there might be cool space stuff, and I do like cool space stuff. And
also your completionist gene will act up because it's only 2 volumes, Andy. You've only got 1 to go.
Yeah, I mean, luckily this is probably another of the benefits of it being physical, because I can't just click a buy now button and it's instantly there. So it's like, oh, well, then it's got to be delivered somewhere, and then I'm going to have to like carry it back home if I get delivered to work, and so much hassle. Whatever will I do? Yeah,
it's amazing how even prime shipping is now a horrifying imposition in our lives. I'm with you in that it sounds weird, but I was so on to buy the second volume just on the strength of the very last minutes or pages of the first volume, and then I read the synopsis for what is going to be in the second volume, and I basically glazed over, because like 2 of the things that it kind of hits as being big points that are going to be in the second volume, I'm like, oh, don't care about that. And, oh, they already did this. And I'm kind of don't think you can do better than that previous attempt they did. So I don't care. So, whoops. So, yeah, by reading the synopsis, I am like really unsold on it. So that's, woof, a bit of a swing and a miss there. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's a weird series. Like I'm so conflicted about it, and it's one of those series where you kind of talk about it and you kind of find yourself really going hard on the negatives, and but I still also don't want to kind of like do away with the fact that there's a lot of positive stuff about this book as well. So it's a real strange one. Yeah,
I mean, we've kind of hit on the, like, not to elongate further, but we've hit on the sort of typical problem where, like, what I want to say is a generally positive, and like if you gave me 1,000-word review, I'd hand in one of those awful reviews that I used to do constantly of like 300 words were basically me going, here's a synopsis, here's why I think it's amazing, by the way, here's 700 words picking out 2 very particular things I dislike, so by weight of words you're going to think I was against it, but that's just how I've come to this, because I like it, and that because I like it is why I'm angry about this stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So hopefully people will tweet us, email us, whatever, and tell us their thoughts. And because I'm interested to hear what the more general feeling about this is, because like Planet Says is definitely kind of regarded as a classic by many, I feel. So clearly, a lot of the issues we have aren't shared, or at least aren't kind of detrimental to it to a lot of people. So maybe people have opinions on that stuff.
Yeah, maybe. I'd be interested to hear them, quite honestly. I was rather late in putting out the call for responses this episode, so apologies to those listening. We did get one comment from UFO, who is basically someone after my own heart, who says, it's great when you can read a whole manga in 2 volumes, and I'm right there with you, because I am hella forgetful. And so the more instances and more volumes, the more likely I am going to be to forget about it. But yeah, it's a really weird duck, for all the reasons we've spent at length talking about. I think one thing about it is that like Planetes is a series, and the series itself is well liked by a very like maybe not influential, but a very storied like segment of anime fandom who have kind of like been around for a while, and so can sort of like say with some authority, I suppose, of like, or just age of like, hey, I've been watching a lot of anime. This one's a good one. Promise, trust me. So that kind of helps having people who've actually watched more than 10 anime. Although sometimes you worry about them. So yeah, that's Planetes, out now in dead tree form. Moving on, it's time to pick out what we're going to be talking about next time after the next 2 weeks. So, first and foremost, Andy stole my choice again, so I have to go for, well, I'm going to go for something that I've been wanting to pick up, and this is a good excuse. It's the 1-volume, not 500 pages book of Go For It Nakamura, which is a very cute one-shot, 1-volume thing which is basically just boys' love, but is more sort of cutesy, like romance boys' love, rather than like getting it on boys' love. And it looks really adorable. So yeah, it's just dude meets dude falls in love with dude has no idea how to handle feelings. Much like most of life, I suppose. So yeah,
I mean, I'm already sold on it if it's not 500 pages. So we could do the next podcast right now. It's great. It's not 500 pages long.
You don't make me try and tempt you, Andy. I nearly picked a light novel for this choice, but I'm going to hold fire on that one. So yeah, over to you, Andy. What have you picked?
So my pick, I mean, you say I stole it, but this is kind of entirely your fault, because I picked volume 1 of The Voynich Hotel, which I think it's the first episode you mentioned that it was coming out, and I can't remember exactly what you said about it, to be honest, but whatever words you formed into a sentence went into my brain and just stuck there as like, Andy, you should read that. So I'm going to do that because it sounded pretty rad. So hopefully you are correct, and it is a good thing.
I hope so too. The Voynich Hotel is by an artist called Diamond Sayman, who I've been a fan of for a while, who does... It's kind of hard to be a fan of because he does really out there weird stuff, but that's what makes it great. Really close to the bone, like vomit on the page sort of thing. So, and like... It's a miracle this is coming out in actual localized English. Like, what the hell? So, yeah, gonna be fascinating. So, moving on, we've got our section of what's up and coming in the world of manga, looking at the future release list. Having a look, in a few weeks, there is a series going to be starting on the 11th called Dragon Goes House Hunting, which, from looking at the synopsis, is basically mirroring all the problems that exist in finding a house nowadays for human beings. So I'm there. I'm there for like bitching about house hunting, but with a dragon in it. Like, that sounds fine.
Yep, that does sound pretty good. I also see in the list, I feel like I must have missed this meeting because I did not realize that the Amagi Brilliant Parklight novels had been licensed that were coming out, because apparently on September the 9th, the first volume of that comes out. That is a series from Shoji Gato of Full Metal Panic fame, and I really like the anime. It's a heck of a lot of fun, so that may be something that I have to pick up and give a look at some point.
Oh yeah, that's a J Novel Club banger. They announced that a while ago. I think it was during one of their like crazy blowout licensing sort of sessions, and I think unsurprisingly for them, bless them, that was when it was also next to a very questionable sounding title, and that of course everyone glommed on the questionable sounding title as the thing to talk about, not a Maggie Brilliant Park. So whoops. Also in light novel news, on my birthday, is coming out Perfect Blue Complete Metamorphosis, which I read a review of that, which entirely put me off of it, and a subsequent tweet about the review. There's a review up on the Anime Limited blog. Quick note, Andy works at Anime Limited. Shh, don't tell anyone. But yeah, put up a review from August and well-regarded, well, I think he's cool, Mr. I forgot.
Andrew Osmond.
Thank you. I just lavished praise on him and then I forgot his damn name. Sorry, Andrew. But yeah, Andrew Osmond reviewed it it, and the good tweet alongside it is like, oh, they say that bad books make good movies. And I was like, shit.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, this came out physically a little while ago. I actually have a physical copy that I've not checked out yet, so maybe I dodged a bullet by not actually getting around to reading it. But it's cool that it's getting a digital release, because, Perfect Blue, kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I just wish the Monogatari books were getting a digital release, because, man, I'm sick of buying them physically. For
I've actually given up on those at the current time for that exact reason, and I suspect that's one that won't change anytime soon and get a digital release. But hey ho.
Nope. I doubt it's going to change it anyway. But yeah, after the Perfect Blue sort of message, I looked sideways at my copy of Paprika, which is another Satoshi Kon film, and like a few people on my timeline started saying, yeah, Kon found the good stuff in that story and left the bad. And so now I might not bother reading it at all, because I need to get through my book reading pile, because I haven't got any room left even to have a book pile. Anyway. But yeah, so cool. That's what's coming up. A small selection thereof. There's plenty more stuff obviously coming out, stuff continuing. But hey, we just pick what we like because, podcast. Cool. So this is the Closedown section. Thank you everyone for listening. You can find our website and all of our previous episodes at screentone.club. You don't have to put www on the front, but you can if you want. The podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, I think Stitcher. I forget. I filled in those forms like a month ago at this point. In general, if you like the podcast, we'd be really appreciative if you told a friend or tweeted about it or left a review. That stuff really, really helps with discoverability and getting people to find the show. We have a Twitter feed, which is at Screentone Club, or one word. I tweet about the episodes on there. We also have an email, too, actually. Whoops. We have screentoneclub@gmail.com, and also newly set up and working after not having it work for like a week and me not figuring out what the problem was, is, podcast@screentone.club. In fact, you can basically write anything you want to before the @screentone.club, and that should work. If you try and test that and find a way to break my email server, I'm going to get really upset, okay? It took a while. Anyway.
please send your emails to Elliot. Stop picking such long series at screentone.club.
Yeah, you can also do that. Just don't put ±% octathrope at screentone.club, or Outlook will get very upset at you.
Drop table at screentone.club.
Yeah, if you do that and my email client collapses, I'm going to be really upset. But I'll also laugh because I can totally appreciate someone doing that, frankly. Someone tried doing that at work. It was real stupid. Someone tried making a user account called Drop Table, and I'm like, nice try, dork. Anyway, computers. So, on personal note, you can find my Twitter feed at Elliot Page, 2 L's, 1 T, or one word. You can find my personal website at moash.it, the internet company of Italy. Haven't tried to take it away from me again this time, thankfully. And Andy, where can we find you?
You can find me on the Twitter, where I am at Hannah's1979.
Grand. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. As mentioned earlier, if you have any thoughts about Planetes or about Satan's Secretary, or even, for that note, about Go For It Nakamura or the Voynich Hotel, drop us a line, Twitter, email, etc. We might get a voicemail line. No, we're not. Anyway, take care, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
Bye, everyone.